I welcome you all. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. I am Niharika, and on behalf of Participatory Research in Asia, I welcome you all. Thank you for joining us today for this discussion. I, along with my colleague Nikita, will be moderating today's discussion. I request participants to feel free to write down their names and organizations that they're involved in. Enhancing Effectiveness of UN Habitat and a member of the Adaptation Commission. We have with us also Dr. Saleemul, who is the Director of International Center for Climate Change and Development and Professor, Independent University, Bangladesh. He's Senior Fellow at the International Institute for Environment and Development in London. He's an expert on adaptation to climate change in the most vulnerable developing countries. Both Ms. Patel and Dr. Haq are playing a critical role in organizing this international conference, Gobeshona. Thank you so much for joining us, both of you. We also have with us researchers, youth individuals, groups from different parts of the world who will be sharing their research and local actions on the issue of adaptation. We have with us our very own Dr. Rajesh Tandon, the founder president of PRIA and co-chair, UNESCO chair in community-based research and social responsibility in higher education. So thank you all of us for joining today. And I would now like to pass the floor to Dr. Tandon to welcome our participants and speakers. Thank you.
Namaskar. I see people from various parts of the world, which is very heartening. Thank you, Saleemul and Sheela, for joining. When introduction was being made, Sheela was waving her hand. And the reason is that in today's world of technology, we forget that anything which is once recorded digitally remains unerasable forever. So our past associations, our past positions. So what I have been doing for last 3-4 months particularly is whenever somebody invites me to speak somewhere, I send my own CV and my latest photograph, because I have seen people download some 20-year-old CV and 30-year-old photograph, and when I show up, they are surprised because they thought I was some teeny bopper. So now those of us who organize, therefore, should also take the responsibility to drop a line to the resource persons in advance and say, please send us a 5-line CV and one of your latest photographs. All right. Well, why it is important today to talk about this is that never before we have had an opportunity to interact between young people passionate about changing the way our society and economy is functioning, and many experts, many researchers, many champions who have been working very hard over decades to focus on an ecologically balanced lifestyle and world. So the coronavirus has done a great service. And I'm sorry, it has also killed many people and made many many of them ill and dislocated and disrupted their livelihoods. But why it has done a great service is because it has provoked us to re-examine what kind of relationship with our natural resources, our water, forest, our systems of livelihood, and most importantly, it has demonstrated that continued inequality within countries and across countries is going to not solve the problem, irrespective of what agreements are reached in Paris or wherever else they are reached. So Sheela, Saleemul, myself, we are of a generation which is passé. We are, all of you young people and your friends and colleagues and your siblings, your cousins and and all of you, you are going to inhabit a world which your seniors like us may have not made very hospitable. So we want to support you in raising your voice, in making your actions, and taking your call in reshaping this world, more importantly, reshaping your own futures collectively on planet. So the platform, today we are having a conversation with Saleemul and Sheela, and all of you will share. But more importantly, we go back from here to our own networks, friends, communities, and demonstrate what we are doing, what can we do, and come back in 6 weeks from now to the Gobeshona 7 Global Conference to share our stories, our experiences. And this is a wonderful opportunity. It is not often that it comes across in such platforms. So thank you, Saleemul, thank you, Sheela, and thank you all of us. I look forward to this conversation today, but more importantly, your leadership, young people, in reshaping our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for welcoming the participants and also setting the context for this discussion, and also giving us some really important points to think during the discussion right now and also during the 6 weeks and after the Gobeshona conference. So now, before moving ahead, there are some important meeting rules that we would like the participants to follow. Please mute yourselves when someone is speaking. You can put in your questions or comments in the chat box or raise your hands. Please use Hindi and English language for communication. If you need help with translations in Hindi and English, Niharika and I will be helping you with that. This session is being recorded for the documentation purpose, and we hope that you enjoy the session. So now, Dr. Haq, I would now like to invite you to help us in understanding the theme of the Gobeshona conference, that is locally led adaptation action. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Niharika and Nikita and Professor Tandon for inviting me, and Sheila as well. It's a pleasure to meet all of you, and I look forward to hearing your questions and interacting with you. I want to make this a interactive session rather than a speech from my side. So I will do three quick topics. Firstly, what is climate change? Secondly, what is adaptation and locally led adaptation in particular? And then what is the Gobeshona conference and the opportunity that we have there? Climate change, I'm sure I should not have to tell everybody about. It's a global issue, global problem of emissions of greenhouse gases for the last 2 centuries since the Industrial Revolution that is warming the global atmosphere, raising the temperature already by 1 degree plus, and we are headed to around 3 degrees if we don't take action to reduce it. At the global level, we recognize it's a problem. There's an intergovernmental panel on climate change under the UN that brings the scientific world together, that produces scientific reports. There's a UN framework convention on climate change where governments have all come together and have agreed to take actions. The latest meeting was 5 years ago in Paris called the Paris Agreement, where we have agreed to take certain actions. We are now celebrating the 5th year of that. In fact, 12th December, last Saturday was the 5th year anniversary, and the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson hosted a climate ambition summit where countries are planning to do, because under the Paris Agreement, they are called nationally determined contributions, NDCs from every country, which are due this year by 31st December. And then the next meeting of the Conference of Parties, which is the annual meeting of the governments, is called the Conference of Parties. It's going to be hosted in Glasgow in Scotland, hosted by the British government. So Prime Minister Johnson will be the presidency of the COP. So that's what's happening at the global level. At the more local level, particularly in the vulnerable countries and vulnerable communities, that is where I spend most of my time working, is identifying who these vulnerable communities are, finding out how they can be affected by climate change, and then in particular, seeing if there is something that we can do. By we, I mean academics, university professors and researchers, plus our students, young people. Can we engage? Can we help the most vulnerable communities to better prepare? In the climate change jargon, we call that adaptation to climate change, help them adapt to climate change. And we've been doing this for many years now. In the last year with the COVID-19 pandemic, it has hit the same communities from a COVID perspective, both the pandemic in the public health sense of the virus, but also even more by the economic consequences of the pandemic, particularly of slum communities in urban centers. And that's where my relationship with Sheela comes in. We have been working together for a long time now, particularly in her capacity as one of the commissioners of the Global Commission on Adaptation. It's a big global effort that's going on, which she is very much a prominent part of, and I've been supporting her there. And we've been working on the ground with vulnerable communities. We've been producing a series of what we call voices from the front lines of these vulnerable communities going forward, which you can see on our website. And in that context, we are trying to grow a coalition of actors from all over the world who can take this idea of bottom-up capacity building, but not just using these communities as targets or beneficiaries, but enabling them to be actors in their own right, to be agents of change, to be the ones who actually make the change happen. And so that is really what we are trying to do by promoting the concept of locally led adaptation. The most important word in those three words are led, not just for the local people, but enabling them to be the leaders of whatever it is that we are doing. And too often, they are just seen as beneficiaries or targets of top-down efforts from governments or international agencies. We want to change that paradigm from a top-down to a bottom-up thinking. Now, that takes me to the Gobeshona Conference, which I will give you a little bit of a potted history of. Gobeshona, the word is a Bangla word for research, and it was started about it, and we use it as a name for a platform of more than 50 universities and research institutions, mainly in Bangladesh, but also internationally, where we come together to share our research findings with users of research. So it's very much a research into action platform, not just only research platform. And over the years, we have been holding a big annual conference every January, which we used to hold as an in-person conference in our university, my university, Independent University Bangladesh in Dhaka. We'd have several hundred people over about 4 or 5 days as a traditional in-person conference. Quite a few international participants would fly into Dhaka and participate, but it was a physical conference, so people had to come to Dhaka to participate. Now, given the pandemic situation, we are going to make it a virtual conference as of 2021. But one of the virtues, if you like, of becoming a virtual conference is that people don't have to fly to Bangladesh to participate anymore. They can participate from wherever they are. So we are effectively making it into a global conference, not just a Bangladesh-only conference, which it used to be. And a global conference on the theme of locally led adaptation. And so we are going to run it for 7 days from the 18th to the 24th of January. And we are going to run it 24/7. We are having sessions across 24 hours aimed at 3 distinct time zones. The first one is the Asia Pacific time zone in which we are. So from morning hour time to evening hour time. And then we hand over to the Africa and Europe time zone, which is the same time zone. Africa and Europe have the same time zone. And so for about 6, 7, 8 hours, there will be sessions that are run primarily for those geographies, people in those 2 continents. And then a third time zone when those of us who are in our time zone will be asleep. It will be the Americas, North America, Central America, and Latin America, South America. There will be sessions run by our partners in that region who will have sessions. So we want and the theme overall is locally led adaptation everywhere. So we want to hear from people who are working on this, interested in working on this, linking up with each other. And we hope over the 24/7, 7 days, we will be able to get to know more, get more people involved. Now, two more things to tell you about Gobeshona. Firstly, we see this new Gobeshona format of a global conference as the beginning of a new series. So in the old series, it's number 7, but we are now making this into a new series of a global a conference. So it's number 1 in the new series of global Gobeshona conferences. And we're going to hold it every year in January for the next 10 years and use it as a platform to not just have a meeting, but to take things forward. So between meetings, we will continue conversations, discussions, and have groups that are interested in particular issues together and continue these conversations. And I see our conversation today with you as beginning one of these conversations with a group of young people who are interested in taking this issue forward and continuing this conversation, using the conference as one point in time to share it with a much bigger audience, but then the core group continues to take this forward in their own. And the platform that we will be using to do this is a relatively recently set up initiative out of the United States. It's called Simpatico. It's a membership-based online platform with whom we are partnering, and they have very kindly given us free membership for the Gobeshona participants. We can all become members there. And at some point, I'll ask my colleagues to engage with you to show you how to become members. And we will use Simpatico for our longer term, continuing peer-to-peer. It's a peer-to-peer platform. It's not a Zoom platform like this one where you—
Saleem, we can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to turn my camera off because I have internet issues here. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. We want to continue this relationship and getting to know each other and building relationships and joining forces and finding synergies across the world amongst different groups. And this group, to me, is a group of young people. So this is the theme of this group. It's young people who are doing things on their own, doers, not just learners, not coming just to learn something, but to learn and do. So the do part is very, very important. And I want to learn about what you're doing as well, and then see how can we help each other. And the whole idea is that by communicating, by getting to know each other, by networking, we each gain and we each give. We learn and we give and we share with others, and that should help everybody improve and enhance our ability to be effective. And as I said, it won't happen overnight. It will take time. So we will track it over time. Every year in January, we will come together, we will have a bigger meeting, share with each other, and then take it to the next level. And each year, we hope we will be able to expand and increase and enhance our effectiveness and our activities. So I am very happy that you have organized this meeting. Thanks to Professor Tandon for doing this. And I see this as the beginning of a conversation with all of you. And then we'll continue it with my colleagues. Several of them are on this call with us. They will continue the relationship with you. And then the next step in the process will be a meeting with the Simpatico platform people who will show you how to join the platform and then continue this conversation on Simpatico as we go forward, so that it becomes a much more interactive peer-to-peer learning group rather than just a webinar type. So this particular format is more of a webinar type format. We want to go from that kind of format to a much more interactive format on a dedicated platform. I'll stop there. I look forward to having discussions and fielding your questions. I'd be very happy to answer questions. I'll stop there. Thank you very much, Nikita.
Thank you very much, sir, for describing the theme and giving us a brief overview of the Gobeshona conference. It also helped us in understanding the role all of us can play at the conference and also in our local communities. As sir mentioned, we do have young people in this session, but we also have researchers who are using CBPR in the issue to deal with the issue of climate change and sustainability in the community. So we would also love to hear their experiences. I would request the participants to please send in their names and the organizations they're involved in the chat box. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Patel. Ma'am, you've been working on this issue for a very long time, and it would be great if you could throw some light on how can we understand resilience in the context of climate change and sustainability. Ma'am, are you here? I think her call dropped. So, Niharika, I think we can invite the participants now.
Yes, let's do that. We'll get some experience from the participants, the researchers, or the anyone in amongst the participants who would like to share their experience of locally led action or their research on the same on the issue of adaptation.
Niharika, can I interrupt for a minute? Is Saleem here?
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so would it be okay if you just give me a little bit of a introduction to what is this group? How did this group come about? Who are you? And then we can hear from the individuals in the group.
So actually, we've reached out to networks of researchers in our K4C UNESCO K4C hubs that Dr. Tandon and Bud are the chair of. So there are researchers from there. We also have the various youth researchers and participants who are doing they're part of organizations doing local who are leading local actions in their areas. So we would ask some of them to come and maybe share their local experiences on the issue.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
All right. So would anyone like to start and share their experience? You can raise your hand, or you can just switch on your video and feel free to, because we do have questions as well. We can start the question answer round straight away as well, but we would like someone, if someone would like to come and speak.
Just come back.
Oh,
sorry.
Great.
I think I had a problem in my Wi-Fi. So what did I miss?
So, ma'am, there was a question for you, and after that, we wanted to hear experience of the participants. So, I'll just ask you that question, and then we can move on to that. So, you've been working on this issue for a very long time, and it would be great if you could throw some light on how can we understand resilience in the context of climate change and sustainability.
Okay. For those of you who may or may not know about the work of STI and of SPARC and NSDF, we basically work in urban informality with organizations of the urban poor in 33 countries and about 350 cities. And our role has been mainly to stop evictions, to improve the relationship between the city and the communities, to ensure better infrastructure, housing, right to livelihoods, and the need for inclusion of the poor into the city development strategies. And then to work with governments at the national and global level to address the issues that sometimes are flawed from a global perspective down. For instance, all our cities treat slum dwellers as squatters because the land management does not assume that poor people need land to stay. They're all supposed to sort of invisibly hang around the city, service all of us, but they don't have a right to a safe place to stay. So if we look at these issues themselves, we began to look at them through a climate lens quite recently ourselves, because we began to realize that most people who came into the city came because of droughts, floods, famines, crisis in rural areas, which forced them to come into the city. We found that when they came into the city, many times they stayed in very vulnerable locations, which were not good for formal construction. So they faced, in low-lying areas, they faced flooding, their roofs would fly with high winds. The city planning did not address the issue of transport or food supplies or health services, which now in COVID has come out very strongly. So what we realized is that if you look at poor people and vulnerable people, whether urban, rural, any form of vulnerability through a climate lens, then you realize that they have developed lots of resilience to survive. But their resilience does not help them improve the quality of their lives. And therefore, we realize that if through climate change, and it's, Saleem will tell you that a very important element of fighting for lowered emissions, improving the heat content of the is also social justice. So we're saying that we don't want to do climate change at the cost of vulnerability and the poor. We want to ensure that the SDGs and the climate change process nurtures and supports and facilitates these communities that have been intergenerationally impoverished to improve the quality of their lives with better housing, with better amenities, with more identity in the cities, with better food supply, better health, and so on. So that's the way we look at it. And we feel that it doesn't require the poor to, organizations that work with urban or rural poor to change what they do, but to put on a climate lens to that. And I think that is what STI is beginning to learn from the climate change space. And I think the role that Saleem and his colleagues committed to adaptation are helping us create the linkages that help academicians understand how to work with communities, and communities how to work with academics to produce new policies and new strategies that encompass, when you are doing development, to encompass climate. Like for instance, if you are using, that the whole world is going to be water starved at the present rate we are doing. So how do you do water conservation from a climatic perspective to universalize access to water? That becomes a challenge in which the climate process is embedded. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah, it does actually. And thank you very much for actually simply helping us in understanding these concepts and telling us the role of partnerships and how all of us can help us in bringing a change. So thank you very much. So ma'am, when you were not here, we were also telling Dr. Haq about how this group was formed. So Niharika briefly talked about how we've invited people, different researchers who are part of K4C Hub, young people who are working with different organizations and are part of PRIA Youth Network. So we have today with us, and now we will be inviting them to share their experiences of local action and research which they're doing in their communities. So will anyone like to share? Prachi, we got your email and you were sharing the wonderful work young people do in the community you are involved in. So will you like to share?
Yes, hi Niharika. Hello everyone. It's a pleasure being here. So, sorry, apologies, like we couldn't connect our Kishoris in this, but I'm here definitely. I'll share our work, what we do with them. A brief introduction about the initiative I belong to. It's called Homes in the City, and we work for the urban area in Bhuj. So, the initiative is organized through the synergy of expertise of 5 organizations over here. So, all these organizations do work on their own expertise area, but when we work together in Bhuj, we work through this network that's called Homes in the City. So we do work in varied issues like water conservation and management, biodiversity, and civic engagement and governance, and biodiversity, like lot of other things. But last few years we have started working towards climate change. So first of our initiative was to start preparing ward plans. As you know, this western part of Gujarat had a earthquake in 2002, and it's been very haphazardly, the planning has been very it's not in a well planned manner, and it is affecting the lives of the people over here. Like there is like the migrants are already there, but there are more homeless people due to, you know, they have lost their homes during earthquake or such thing. So we trying to work it out, and we mapping the wards, like particularly taking one ward at a time, and then we have technical experts who guide us. So this was the thing we started, and then also we are working on making water maps of the Bhuj. So what we do is like we blessed with the good water, groundwater rich like carrying capacity. So we can, if we plant well, we can store water which is enough for the you know, for the use of the city. Like also historically speaking, Bhuj is very the king at that time had made like the network of ponds and wells very well, which is very sustainable. But over the time, it has been broken, like because obviously due to a sewage line has been passed through it, or the road has been constructed which broke the network. So we also trying to revive it again, but then suddenly pandemic happened and everything went, you know, toss. So now right now we are again, what we did is we did the mapping of how COVID has changed lives of people over here, and then suddenly we came to know it's like economic crisis over here. So what we thought is turning to alternative energies and growing food at our own backyard. So this is definitely what we are doing with youth. We involving them and turning them in a way to have a healthy lifestyles. So we training them to grow their own vegetables in the backyards, and the waste that is generated, we ask them to segregate it and compost it to get the manure. Also, we don't encourage them to use pesticides. Either we ask them to use you know, the combination of jaggery and ash, and so such stuffs which is easily available in your kitchen, we can use it, like using turmeric and salt together and sprinkling it on the plants to get rid of certain insects and stuff like that. So we use that. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. So yeah.
Prachi, we would like to keep it short so that we can also hear other experiences.
Yes. Yeah. So right now we're working in like such in a manner which we would encourage the youths in Bhuj. Yeah, definitely. Also, one more project is in pipeline where we're trying to use alternative fuel energy like solar and biogas to start a canteen service which would be run through the youths in the Bhuj. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prachi. We would also like to ask Samiksha if she's there to just share the KBC local action, something about that, and just a brief about what actions are being taken on the ground for the KBC project. Samiksha?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Niharika. I would like to talk about this, but we have one KBC fellow, Anandita Behra, with us, and she's prepared what to talk about it because she's leading a local action in her area. So I would like, Anandita, आप बोलो, आप बताओ आप क्या कर रहे हो अपने एरिया में.
Anandita, आप कॉल पे हो?
Yes, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I am Anandita. मैं केबीसी से मैंने केबीसी के साथ बहुत सारे काम किया और मैं केबीसी से जुड़ी हूँ और मैं अपने लोकल एरिया में बहुत सारा इसमें जो हो रहा है जेंडर इक्वलिटी ऊपर में एक्शन ली हूँ. इससे पहले मैंने अपने ग्लोबल जो है उसके ऊपर भी मैंने एक्शन लिया था अपने एरिया में और मैंने एक बार अपने एरिया में जो ड्रेन्स जाम्स हो रहे और स्ट्रीट लाइट्स जो नहीं चल रही थी तो उसके बारे में मैंने अपने बीएमसी कॉर्पोरेटर के साथ बात की थी तो उनने सुना था बहुत देर से सुना था तो मैंने बहुत सारे एक्शन लिए और आगे भी लूंगी. तो मैंने अभी बहुत छोटे छोटे काम करे हैं और अभी तो उतना ही बस चल रहा है।
आनंदिता, आपने क्या एक्शंस लिए हैं?
मैंने पहले लिए थे, पहला मेरा जो एक्शन था वो था अपने एरिया में जो ड्रेन्स वगैरह हैं वो सब मतलब क्लियर करने के लिए, और जो स्ट्रीट लाइट्स हैं वो तो लगी है पर जलते नहीं है, उसके बारे में मैंने एक्शन लिया था।
ओके, एंड आपने ये एक्शन कैसे लिया?
मैंने पहले अपने लोकल एरिया से बात की थी कि वो सहमत है कि नहीं। उसके बाद मैंने एक एप्लीकेशन लिखा था बीएमसी के पास, उनसे मैंने कांटेक्ट भी किया था। उनने बोला था हम अपने लोगों को भेजेंगे अपने एरिया पे। ऐसे 5-6 दिन चले गए पर कोई भी नहीं आया। उसके बाद मैं अपने पेरेंट के पापा के साथ गई थी पूरे बीएमसी ऑफिस के पास, उनके साथ बात की। तो उसके बाद वो 15-16 दिन लग गया आने के बाद उनने क्लियर करा। अभी मेरे एनवायरनमेंट थोड़ा क्लियर है।
ओके, थैंक यू आनंदिता फॉर हम सबके साथ शेयर करने के लिए. So for those who cannot understand Hindi, so I'll just briefly tell what Anandita told. Anandita is a adolescent girl who is working with Martha Fell's KBC program, and she was talking about how she is working in a community to deal with this issue. So she was facing the issue of drainage clogging in her community, and with the support of local leaders, she contacted municipalities or the authority responsible for this, and there was no response. And further she took help from her parents, and now she has got the drainage system cleared in her community. Thank you, Anandita.
What is KBC?
Thank you, ma'am.
Samiksha, would you like to briefly tell about that?
Sure, I will. KBC is Kadam Badhate Chalo. It's a program of Martha Farrell Foundation. So KBC works with young adolescent girls and boys on various issues such as gender and basically violence against women and girls. So we train them, we talk about self, and then we talk about gender, and then in the process of doing so, we try to focus on making them change agents. And after that, they mobilize in their community. They talk about gender and violence in their community. They lead their action, their project in the community. So, Kadam Badhate Chalo, basically this kind of program.
So just an advice to all of you when you are making a presentation, you have to don't talk in acronyms because all of us don't know what it is, and always say which city you are working in and things like that, so that because we are not face to face, it becomes very important to get these coordinates. So it's just some advice on talking on the net.
Thank you, ma'am. We will definitely keep this in mind. And now, before we move ahead, is anyone will anyone be interested to talk about the work they're involved in and share their experiences? Okay, Shoko, will you? Yes, please try to keep it short.
Hello, everyone. And now,
Shoko, we can't hear you.
my name is Shoko. We are Go. Today we got to know this. You hear me? No?
Yeah, we can hear
Am I
you.
audible? Okay.
Yes.
We are working in Yangon, Myanmar, together with the STEPS Community Architect Group. They are here, Kamya. We have a kind of a young community architect group. And one of the focus is community-led heat mitigation. So our organization has been supporting community-led housing and land rights and community development practice. But we are adding the lens of climate change, especially the urban heat island problem to this practice. So these STEPS, this community architect group, together with the urban poor community, they have been trying to understand how those communities are mitigating the heat, as well as what is the difficulty and what is inequality, so that we can highlight the environmental justice and then as well as the resilience by the people. This is what we have been doing, and then I just wanted to keep it short, but maybe steps you can say hi or something maybe. Kamya or Kopya or Anzamya.
Hi everyone. We are from Mumbai.
So yeah, we are very happy to see you all, and then today we thought it would be nice to discuss what kind of like conversation we can have in the future, or maybe the January conference or other things, because we also want to know the other countries' practice. Or so that's all. Thank you so much.
Shoko, there's a question for you. So, if you would like to address it briefly, could you tell us what the urban heat islands are?
Urban heat islands are like in urban area that the heat is the effect of heat is much more because of the environment, because of the surface, because of the factory, because of the lack of trees. So, and also density. And then in the poor neighborhood, that impact tree and the tree coverage is less in urban area. So that is our focus. Then so that we can raise the awareness and then change the maybe larger urban planning or things like that.
All right, thank you very much.
This is a very big challenge for all cities and all urban poor. So it's a very important, we're very glad to hear about your work, Shoko. There are many other
Thank you
groups.
so much.
Link it.
Okay. We'd like to learn more from other groups too.
Thank you very much. So now we will be moving on to the question answers round. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat box from our facilitators. And if you raise your hand, we'll allow you to speak. And if you want to just type it in the chat box, we will speak the question on behalf of you or invite you. So moving ahead, Dr. Haq and Ms. Patel, we would just like to briefly know what are the, when we talk about South Asian context, what are the most vulnerable groups that require maximum interventions when we talk about climate change?
Saleem, you start.
Shall I go first? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So in South Asia generally, and it is also true globally, the most vulnerable places or ecosystems are some particular ones which are definitely more vulnerable than others. So from a heat perspective, the dry conditions, drought-prone zones in the rural areas, so for example, in India, Rajasthan or Kutch, places like that, are going to be affected by higher temperatures as well as by longer droughts. So that's one big impact, just directly because the global temperature is going to rise. The question we just heard about in urban centers, that also has an impact because urban centers tend to have a higher temperature than the surrounding rural area because of the factors that we just heard, the packed population, lack of trees, a more dense pollution, etc. So heat islands, these are called urban heat islands. They are abnormally high temperatures and people do suffer from the temperature there as well. The second big group of communities who are going to be vulnerable are flood-prone communities. So we have in South Asia some of the world's biggest rivers, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and others as well, the Mahanadi. And so the populations that are living on the floodplains of these rivers, which get flooded, they get somewhat flooded every year, and every 20 years they get very badly flooded. And what used to be a bad flood every 20 years is now going to become a bad flood every 4 or 5 years instead of 20 years. And in Bangladesh right now, we just had our 5th 1 in 20-year magnitude bad flood in the last 20 years. And that's what climate change is going to do. Climate change is going to change the pattern of floods and make the bad floods more frequent. And then a third category which we are also facing are cyclonic storms. For example, in West Bengal, in India and Bangladesh, we get hit by cyclones from the Bay of Bengal. Sometimes they even hit Andhra Pradesh in India. And we had a recent super cyclone called Amphan, which hit Kolkata, West Bengal, and then came to Bangladesh and did quite a lot of damage. Now, cyclones themselves are not going to necessarily be more frequent, but they will be more intense because the intensity of a given cyclone depends on the sea surface temperature. And the sea surface temperature depends on atmospheric temperature. And so when the atmospheric temperature goes up because of global warming or climate change, then sea surface temperature goes up. And when the sea surface temperature goes up, a cyclone becomes more severe. And the one we just had last May, called Cyclone Amphan, became a super cyclone. It's above a category 5. And because the sea surface temperature in the Bay of Bengal at that time was higher than normal. It's about 2 degrees higher than normal. And then the final category of people are ones living in low-lying coastal zones. So for example, the low-lying coast of Bangladesh, tens of millions of people living there, in West Bengal, other coastal areas of India, the Andaman Islands. People in the low-lying coast are going to be affected by sea level rise in particular, salinity intrusion initially, and then eventually land itself will get inundated with sea level rise, and tens of millions of people in the low-lying coastal zones of the countries, all of our countries, will be badly affected. So, and then there are high mountains as well. So since Bangladesh doesn't have high mountains, I'm not mentioning high mountains, but Nepal, Bhutan, and even in India and Pakistan, some of the higher mountain zones are also going to be affected by higher temperature as well. So there are particular ecosystems that are more vulnerable than others, but everywhere is going to be affected and everyone is going to be affected. So we all need to know about it, and we all need to know what is it we can do about it. And that's where knowledge and locally led adaptation actions by citizens is an important factor and a role that they can play. I hope that's useful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huck. Would Ms. Patel, would you like to add to that?
You know, I would like. I don't think anybody can surpass the succinctness and the accuracy of what Saleem says. But what I would like to do is, I'd like to turn this around into what is the imagery of participation of young people from the global south that I am aspiring to explore through these discussions. You know, last year when we all went to the UN Assembly, there were many young people there, but they were all cloistered in a separate space. We never met them. Like, they were in their own things. They were angry with all the adults, as they should be. But I believe that that transformation comes out of people of different experiences, different ages, different expertise, different areas of functioning meet together, and that synergy produces new knowledge. So what I want to do, so that is one thing. The other thing is, I have been seriously dismayed at the fact that there isn't really a representative constituency of young people that participate in this process. And this virtual thing allows us to do that. And I want to apologize that because we did this rather quickly and late, there are about 5 organizations that have youth leaders who are not present today. And we'll try and look at ways by which we can send them this recording, but also look at ways by which we can get this circulation of interest, involvement, and everything happening. We have a network of waste pickers who have young people there. We have a network of slum dwellers, and we have a youth movement there. And there are other young people doing amazing things. So what I'd like to do is, if Saleem doesn't mind, Saleem, it would be really exciting for young people here and who listen to this recording to understand the architecture of exploring year-round dialogue. You know, this thing of we meet together to dialogue on something, then we go and do our own thing, then we meet again. And this whole pathway of different events through the year that some of us have already begun to understand, starting from Gobeshona, which starts in January, and then all the other events. So if you could quickly walk through that for these young people, I think that would be very useful. Can I ask you to do that?
Sure, happy to do that. So let me just share a little bit about these various events that Sheela just mentioned. I already have explained Gobeshona, which takes place every January. The focus of Gobeshona, I'm going to turn my camera off because I have internet problems here. I hope you can still hear me. So the Gobeshona conference is in January every year. The focus of the Gobeshona conference is primarily research into action. So it is researchers plus action-oriented people and young people in particular. And we want to share what we're doing. And as I said, it's now going to be an annual global event. And so I invite all of you to participate in it and to become part of this ongoing, I characterize it as a 10-year journey that we are going to embark on, starting from January 2021 and going to 2030 over the next 10 years, and see whether we can enhance, improve the situation from where it is today and take it forward in a very meaningful way together. The second event that takes place every year, it has been doing so for the last 15 years, is an event called the International Conference on Community-Based Adaptation, which I started over 15 years ago when I was in London at the International Institute for Environment and Development. It's an annual conference of several hundred people, mainly practitioners, mainly development NGOs like Oxfam and CARE and ActionAid and others, and also local CBOs as well, who work at community level in different countries. It used to be a physical conference where people flew into a country. We held it in different countries each year. The last one was last year in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Sheela and I were both there. This year's one was supposed to have been in Bangkok, but because of the pandemic, it didn't happen in Bangkok. It became a virtual event, online event. Next year's event, which will be the 15th in the series, so it's been going on for 15 years now. Next year, it will be hosted by Bangladesh, but we have decided it will also remain a virtual conference, although Bangladesh, the host organization is going to be BRAC, together with my center, ICAD. We might have not an international, but a national gathering done by BRAC in Bangladesh, but we'll do the international part virtually. And that again, as I said, is a meeting of practitioners, people working with grassroots communities around the world. And they've been meeting for the last 15 years. So there's a very substantial community of practice there. And then the last meeting in each year is the Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which I mentioned earlier, which is a very big conference, mainly of governments. But along with governments, there are many, many different NGOs and other organizations. Big youth group, as Sheela said, also go there, but not very many South youth, but mostly Northern youth, but nevertheless, there's a big youth program there, and many other constituencies are represented. At the Conference of Parties every year in COP, which again moves from continent to continent. Next year, it will be in Glasgow, in Scotland, in the UK. The IID, my UK-based former organization, do a 2-day side event. It's quite a big side event. It started many years ago when I was there and I started it. It's now being continued by them. It's called Development and Climate Days at the COP, at the Conference of Parties. And it's somewhere where people can come together. But the COP itself has tons of thousands of people. It's too big. But in the Development Climate Days event, we can bring them together for 2 days to share and network. So these 3 events every year, starting in January with Gobeshona, focus on learning. Middle of the year, community-based adaptation conference, focus on community of practice. End of the year, conference of parties, development climate days, focus on giving messages to high-level global actors in the global negotiations on climate change. And we want to make this an annual cycle. As I said, it's a 10-year journey. Every year we will meet 3 times a year and share each other what we are doing and move things forward. The whole point is to build momentum to move forward in solidarity with each other. And what we are finding now that we have made the Gobeshona conference a virtual event is that virtual event now gives us the opportunity to connect South-South connections much, much more than we had before. Although we accept that there is a price to pay for this, not everybody has access to the internet, and therefore some communities may not be able to participate, but nevertheless, it does allow a much, much bigger participation from the South in a virtual global meeting. And so the Gobeshona conference in particular, we are going to make it a permanently virtual, permanently global event. And as I said, have ongoing conversations in between with using the Simpatico platform, which is a peer-to-peer learning platform that we are going to be engaging with. And I will invite all of you to participate in that. And my colleagues will arrange a separate session to introduce you to the Simpatico platform and how to use that going forward. I hope that answers your question, Sheela.
Yes, it does. Does anybody have any clarifications that you might need from Saleem before I go on? So if there aren't any, you can interrupt me if somebody suddenly pops up in the chat or something. The other thing which is important for me to say to you is that Saleem many years ago, we call him the godfather of local adaptation. He's attended every single COP, every single meeting. So he's the repository of the history of this process. But I think what is important in this is that young people inherit the knowledge, the politics, the networks, the linkages that have been created in the past through these processes. And the second more important thing is that we believe that everybody's actions, everybody's choices, everybody's upward mobility that is carbon neutral matters on this planet. And therefore, you all become in your own ways agents of transformation and change to all those that you can meet, talk to, influence. So the advantage of a virtual process, even though it will not include or it will exclude still many people who don't have digital access, but by creating this huge network that links to something that is available like these forms, that process can be transformed or translated to local areas. I'll speak a little bit about the Global Commission. For many, many years, and Saleem, please interrupt or correct if I have excluded or misrepresented something, because I'm still a student of this process. For many years, if you take my own experience, the protection of the environment as we knew it 15 years ago in our own country was seen as having a green and a blue agenda. That means it was to green the planet, it was to improve the atmosphere. And always the poor were seen as people who messed everything up. They invaded the forest, they dirtied the water, they did all kinds of things. And nobody actually looked at how, if you don't look at the brown agenda, which is things that matter day to day in the lives of poor people, all the choices that they have do not allow them to become protectors of the environment. Because if you don't have a safe place to defecate, you will go to the sea and defecate, or the river, or the railway track. So it's only more recently, as the whole issue of social justice and equity has risen with the Millennium Development Goals and the SDGs and other things, that all of us who work with vulnerable communities have begun to feel that climate is our business as well. Because if we can find solutions that are good for us, good for the planet, good for our environment, then it's a win-win situation. But that requires new collaboration, new investment, new ways of doing things. And that's where the concept of adaptation is important. Because all of us have to weigh the inherited ways of reacting to situations, which is the way we do most of the things. We do it by default. And therefore, we now have to look at examining the climate or the environmental or the equity issues before we navigate the choices of action that we do. And so accompanying this was the fact that most of our governments are much more comfortable doing what is called mitigation. That means they do large projects that might reduce the carbon emissions. But the act of helping millions and millions, and actually today they say that out of the 7 billion people in the world, you have 1 billion people who are very vulnerable, very, very vulnerable. And so their needs, their aspirations, which were going to be looked at through the adaptation lens, was always discounted. So today, if you look at a lot of the work that many of these international environment-related organizations, including IID and the work that Saleem does, shows that global money that was allocated to work on climate, most of that money went towards mitigation. And so the setup of the Commission for Adaptation to Climate Change, it's called the GCA, Global Commission for Adaptation, which was set up with Ban Ki-moon, Kristalina Georgieva and Bill Gates as the 3 chairs, and about another 30 of us as commissioners representing different constituencies, was to highlight and champion the role of adaptation in climate change. And it is through that lens that we are reaching out to all of you. And so if you have access to the net, go and look at those things. There are lots of events this month and next month that will be looking at the work of the GCA. There are lots of papers, a lot of work, a lot of challenges that are being thrown up. And there's a big demand from grassroots social movements and networks of the urban and rural vulnerable groups to say that social movements emerge because legal frameworks that guide investment today exclude them. They could be people who are of indigenous origins. There might be farmers, fisher folk, informal workers, small, very small farmers, not even medium sized, but really small farmers, and the urban poor. And so we are saying that the inclusion of social movements, global, local, national, represents the first step towards inclusion of constituencies that have been intergenerationally excluded. And so we look for the role of young people to also transcend their own locality and their niche to reach out to young people who are different from you. So in the next 2-3 weeks and in the first 2 weeks of January, with the help of PRIA and ICAD and the Gobeshona network, we will reach out to youth from these different movements. And our goal is that we embed your presence in as many of the other events as listeners or as respondents, but also encourage you to set up your own events. They may be in Gobeshona if there is still space, or if we can ask Saleem to reserve spots for in the 3 slots for some young people to raise their voices. We want to link you to the movements of the urban poor, of youth groups in the north as well. But those are all ideas and aspirations that we can only do with your involvement and participation and the support of the network of senior organization leaders that are also participating in today's process. So I'll stop here. How much time do we have? We can have another round of questions.
We have about 20 more minutes.
Okay.
So, well, thank you so much, Ms. Patel and Dr. Haq, for giving us a contextualizing, the idea of adaptation and the importance of grassroots organizations and initiation of movements and agency at the local level. One question that also comes to mind is about the role of universities to create this kind of a conversation amongst students, amongst young people to regarding adaptation. And we wanted to ask all 3 of you, Dr. Tandon, Dr. Haq, Ms. Patel, for your comments about how we can initiate that dialogue at universities. And taking it forward, even Anshuman's question here regarding, how we can create this day-to-day conversation at the university level.
I think Rajesh and Saleem should start.
Let me go first. Yes,
yeah.
I'll go first, and if you don't mind, I may have to leave just before the end of the hour. So 2 things to share with you. Firstly, in my university in Bangladesh, we have set up 2 networks of universities. In fact, Gobeshona is a network of universities primarily, but with other non-university organizations as well in Bangladesh. And as I said earlier, we have more than 50 institutions as partners in that. And the role of universities is very much about, on the one hand, generating knowledge, but on the other hand, engaging with decision makers and users of knowledge, all the way from national government down to communities themselves. And our students, both our postgraduate research students as well as even our undergraduate students, all have a big role to play in that reaching out with them. At the same time, we are also the coordinators of a bigger network of universities across the least developed countries. It's called the Least Developed Countries Universities Consortium on Climate Change. The least developed countries, or LDCs, are a formal group of the poorest countries in the world, 48 of them. They are a caucus group in the negotiations in the Conference of Parties, and I advise them on issues related to adaptation. And currently the group is chaired by Bhutan. And under that group is an official network of universities called LUCC, L-U-C-C, or LDC Universities Consortium. And we do the same thing. We collaborate on how do we work at community-based, locally led adaptation? All of our countries are very vulnerable. We have vulnerable communities, both in the cities and the urban sectors. How do we identify with them? How do we communicate with them? How do we reach out to them? How do we engage with them? And finally, there is a recent development in the Global Center on Adaptation, which is a global center with headquarters in the Netherlands, who are setting up regional centers around the world. They just recently set up one for South Asia, headquartered in Dhaka, together with the Bangladesh government. The Prime Minister of Bangladesh launched it in a couple of months ago in September. And that's a regional center for the South Asia region. And one of the things that we are planning to do under that is to set up a regional set of universities. I'm already in touch with a number of universities in South Asia. We want to set up a network of South Asian universities, have activities both at the faculty level in terms of teaching, researchers level, postgraduate students, and then undergraduate students getting involved in doing things. But the most important thing is not sitting in the university just doing our own thing, but reaching out and working with particularly the vulnerable communities and engaging with them. I'll stop there. Happy for Rajesh and Sheela to take over.
Thank you very much, Saleemul. Very, very helpful information and the networks you talked about. There are two particular ways in which I think work is happening. We can advance and use the Gobeshona platform, not just the conference, as Saleemul said. And thank you very much, Saleemul. I know you have to leave, but thank you very much, and your colleagues. We will continue to interact more actively, our colleagues as well. One is that the Gobeshona, this focus is giving focus on research with and on locally led adaptation. So actions which are locally led need to be systematized. Many a times, people who have worked in drought-prone areas, people who have worked on floodplains, you know, those communities' actions have been seen as, you know, sort of spontaneous or haphazard or disorganized, which is not the case. Their own knowledge and experience and wisdom doesn't get captured. Second is that this adaptation knowledge is not used much in national or provincial planning by government agencies. You know, what Saleemul mentioned about this 12th December thing, and you may have read yesterday morning, I read in the newspaper, Indian Prime Minister, he made all these announcements about renewable energy, gigawatt, all that is big ticket mitigation, as Sheela was talking about. It is not, there is no discussion or no sharing of what communities on the ground have been doing. So this is one responsibility that the world of academia must take. They must get their students and faculty involved in documenting, systematizing, building knowledge from that. The second thing to remember is that, at least in the national context, in India, the national education policy now has a clear emphasis on paying attention to climate issues, not just as peripheral, but also in their own curriculum and pedagogy. And curriculums for architecture, planning, I can see Madhura here, Daphne is there, you know, curriculum of architecture, planning, engineering, business management, economics, not just forestry and agriculture and hydrology, but in these disciplines, curriculum must be changed. Curriculum should be adapted to teach young people new knowledge that is emerging, because this curriculum, bulk of that curriculum was prepared in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And at that time, there was no discussion on climate change. So if our engineers, if our professionals, if our architects, planners, economists, and business managers are not informed in their professional development of the challenges and issues that local adaptation is producing, then they will, how will they play a role in the coming period? And I look at, therefore, the role of academia, both in terms of research and teaching, far more critical than has been practiced. And I think this network that Saleem talked about at South Asian level, India may not be treated as a least developed country anymore, but more than half the population of India is least developed, because all their indicators are worse than some of the sub-Saharan African indicators. You take a look at nutrition of under 5, and our malnutrition rate is worse than many LDCs. So there are lessons to be learned in these networks. And while official government-to-government platforms may be restricted, informal civil society, academic platforms are always open for engagement. So I think the last point I want to make to all of you, and Nikita in particular, and all other young people who are here on the platform, that I think what Sheela was saying about the organized voice of young people from the global south. We all love Greta, but she cannot be the only symbol of resistance for climate change. Where are the Gretas in India? Where is that Ananditas and Baheras and Prachis and Ongs and whoever from the global south? And I think all the networks that you all are part of with young people, you need to carry this message. You need to excite them and support them in engaging with this. I know we all have many problems, but if there is one thing which will shape the future of all of you 10, 15 years from now, after we are dead and buried, is what decisions are taken these days about climate change, particularly adaptation issues, and what students and professionals are learning about it in the course of their research and teaching. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Dr. Haq, for answering the question. And definitely, as rightly pointed, I think we should all together try to have this platform where we can collectively raise our voices. And one of the comments is Lakshya added in the chat box, that it's important to talk to young people in their own language. So I think this is also one thing that we need to keep in mind. Ma'am, Ms. Patel, when you were talking about young people, one of the participants raised the question that given how young demographies are in South and Southeast Asia, isn't every issue a youth issue? And why are there separate room discussions to begin with? Ma'am, you're on mute.
I was muted, so I didn't know that. Okay, that's the reason why I put it right in front. Very often there is in global circles, if you take gender, for instance, there's always a separate space to discuss gender. In my opinion, gender and youth are embedded deeply in every single conversation. Now, the point is that as long as people who discuss gender or discuss youth treat themselves as a minority, they will want separate space. That's been the politics of creating separate space. It's a safe space to speak. You do it there, then you come. But what history has shown is that we have to aggregate in very large numbers as the silent constituency. See, you are right. South Asia and East Africa have the largest youth dividend. which can become a disaster. It's on the point of being a disaster. So the question is, are educated young people going to extend hands with those who are vulnerable and produce this new constituency which says, listen to us. We have a view, we have an opinion. And that opinion is not just a reaction. See, the problem is that there are so many angsts and terrible things that you need to fight against. But there are a lot of things that you have to do proactively to transform things. So how do you balance the two? Now, some of the elders in today's conversation are people who, as young, all of us started working when we were 18, 19, 20. So our whole thing is that we all have aged, but we want this next generation to feel as entrepreneurial, as excited, as ready to aggregate, because unless you aggregate, your voice won't be heard. How do you aggregate beyond the barriers of constraint? You know, I'm a college student in this town, I'm a slum dweller in that town, I'm a this and I'm a that. We have lots of reasons to be separated or to be put into little boxes and categories. But if we can transcend that and we can develop a youth agenda that challenges the harmful paradigms that all of us are, all of you are also being pushed to do. You know, if you talk to your grandma, she'll tell you that the food most of you eat is actually unhealthy because of the fact that everybody's eating processed food. What do young people feel about that? What is the aspect of heredity and modernity that you will put together to give yourself a healthy diet? Because you have to look after yourself too. So things like that, you know, it's internal, external choices that you make. So it's not just doing something that's good for some climate somewhere else. It's also to do, so therefore, Sakshi and Anandita talking about cleaning drains. Shoku and others talking about heat islands. Somebody else talking about each and everything matters. The point is, the larger picture should be at your backdrop. We all can't do everything all the time, everywhere. Somebody has to do something. So make it like that. So thank you so much. Whenever you guys want to have another session in which you have, today everybody's been quite quiet, I think. I need a more noisy question hour. So we'll try and do that next time. And it'll be nice if you send us all this recording so that we can send these, you know, and things like what Saleem talked about or Rajesh talked about, we can take those clips and also put them up on the web. It'd be good for a lot of more people to hear that. If you can, guys can do translation, even better. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Can you please keep it short?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Yeah.
As pointed out by Dr. Rajesh Tandon, we have already one subject in our curriculum that is called climate responsive architecture. And we started here in our university post-graduation course in landscape architecture. So that is also talking about biodiversity and other areas. So we are working on these areas.
Where are you from, ma'am?
I am from Manipal University, Jaipur. I am a director of architecture at Manipal University.
Happy to meet you. We will be in touch with you.
Yes, yes, same here. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Patel. Thank you, Madhura ma'am, for sharing this. And Dr. Haq has to leave, so he's left, but thank you to him as well for such a wonderful discussion we had just right now. I'm really sorry if we missed any questions. I think we've tried to cover all the questions, so thank you very much. I would now like to invite Dr. Tandon to just conclude this session and also lay out how do we move forward.
Oh, thank you. I think Sheela gave a number of good ideas in terms of taking some clips, putting them up, and circulating to all the youth network that we know of. But let us plan another round of conversation among young people without Sheela, Saleemul, me, doesn't matter, before Gobeshona. And so that you can design uh, how you want to take hold of the Gobeshona platform. I think it should be youth-led, youth design, and you decide if you need anybody to come in for 10 minutes, but you control that. I think the most important thing about the shift that needs to be made vis-a-vis young people is the shift that was made on women's issues only about 18, 20 years ago. Even though the agenda of gender equality and all came up front from the 1980s onwards, and CEDAW, etc., were formulated long ago, the question of discussion on women's issues was always constructed by others. And it's only in the last 2 decades that women activists, feminists, and their supporters said, we will construct the agenda and ask you to respond. And I think this is what needs to happen with youth now. All kinds of youth policies are being made by people who are non-youth any longer. The problem with youth is, unlike the gender issue, the problem with youth is all of us can say, yes, yes, I have been there because I was also 18-year-old once. If I'm so, but that's not the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is that in today's context, particularly on this issue of climate, how can young people shape the agenda and design conversations? And then you invite any expert you want to come into that conversation for 5-10 minutes, give them a precise task, ask them difficult questions, and let them go. And then you carry on, you strategize. Yeah. Because that, I like lecture's point. It is not, it's pointless to pretend that Sheela, Saleemul, or I can talk like young people today. No, we can't. If we try to do that, it will be hocus pocus. So you construct that, you invite us. We have something useful to share. We will share if you think so. But you have to construct the agenda. You have to design your own process, and you have to engage others on your terms. On your terms. And I think you can start with some conversation mid-January or so, and take it to Gobeshona platform. And as the platform provides peer-to-peer learning, bar anybody who is not young from your platform, you carry on your platform. Yeah. Other people can have other platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And now I'm definitely going to contact Prachi, people from Women. Shoko, I'll definitely contact you and the youth groups to have this conversation, and let's take it forward. So thank you very much for joining us today. It would be great if all of you could just switch on your cameras for a minute so that we can take a picture together. All right, I think I'm going to take the picture now. Thank you very much. I've taken the picture. Thank you for joining us. Let's stay connected and take these conversations forward. Thank you, Sheela ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. See you soon.